Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. But so David, let's talk about local link building and your observations there.
Sure. We, as also as part of this exercise, we did sort of a broad competitive analysis in the medical vertical. A couple of what I would perceive to be relatively competitive sort of keyword groups, and I think that there's two big takeaways. One of which I'll talk about in my upcoming SMX Advanced presentation in Berlin next month, which is when you're doing keyword research, and I don't know whether this falls under keyword research or competitive analysis, but to me, keyword research in local is worthless if you're not actually analyzing who is ranking for a given SERP. And the reason for that is the SERP localized? That's the first question. Like, if you're a small business, small local business, and you even compete for a very high volume phrase that might show 250,000 national searches every month, but if that search is not localized, you're never going to beat out the Mayo Clinics and the Johns Hopkins of the world. So why don't you orient your site around even a very popular term if you don't have a chance to rank for it? So that's kind of number one. It's just what's the degree of localization. And then the second piece of that, sort of, again, keyword research / competitive analysis is, this is not a slight against any particular SEO tool out there, but I haven't seen one that actually looks at the sites that are ranking and classifies them as local or national in nature. And if you're just looking at sort of keyword difficulty scores or just looking at domain ratings, sort of broadly of the top 10 organic results, you're really not getting the nuance of what's been true since the Venice update in 2012, which is that Google is giving an artificial boost to, in this case, independent medical practices, small medical practices who operate only in the city that's being searched. And so generally speaking, those practices had a very poor link building profile. Again, even in what I would have perceived to be two fairly competitive, high search volume medical fields, the local businesses that Google was choosing to rank for these competitive terms in urban markets had generally very poor backlink profiles. There were only, I would guess that the median number of what I perceived to be a sort of high quality link, not a directory, not a sort of garbage guest post on a meaningless blog. Quality links like from a local charity or the local college or university, or a local newspaper article, or even a national newspaper article about a health and wellness topic. Like most of these sites that were ranking had maybe 1 to 2 of those quality links. And so I think Amanda Jordan talked about this at her MozCon presentation, that Rickety-Roo is starting to categorize links in this way. And I think if you look at the quality of links for most local businesses, it's still a very low number. And I think that sort of piggybacking on what Mike was saying with the sort of thickness of the tail and the Finder results, I think that it also speaks to, hey, if you just do a couple of things right, like, you're going to get some balance of these sort of longer tail engagements and organic results as well. And it doesn't take, I forget exactly when I tweeted this, which I'm no longer active on X, but several years ago I tweeted like the average number of, quality small business links is 2 or something like that. And that was probably 8 years ago. I don't think it's changed. I think that link building is still ignored by a lot of small businesses. And really, like, this research sort of surprised me that that A, that's still true, and B, that it is bizarre that it's still true, because it only takes a couple of good links to rank, even in very competitive categories still. So just a sort of missed opportunity by a lot of small businesses. And I know link building is hard. I know it's difficult to scale. I know it's difficult to build agency processes around it. But I think if you're leaving it out, you're not really doing your clients the best service. So,
well, unless you're working with a local SEO, most business owners have no idea how to do link building or what link building is, or how to get links. So it's something that's really low on their list of comprehension and priorities, even though it shouldn't be.
And most local SEOs think that directory building is, because it's easy to scale, many of them do it. The smarter ones do figure out how to do bespoke links on a per market basis. But it's harder to scale that for them. But the best ones, the better ones, do that. So if you're looking at a local SEO agent, see, that's the question I would ask: is do they help you do that? Right? I mean, to me, that would be the dividing criteria whether you want to be doing business with them.
Go ahead, David. One point about directories that I would make that we saw is that, there's this sort of debate about citations and whether or not citations matter and where your citation should appear. One of the things that we saw from user research was in certain categories, directories really matter. So in medical, for example, a directory like ZocDoc is very important. And there are a couple others that also rank and where people legitimately engage with them. So, it's a mistaken position to completely dismiss just directories. You really need to do it on a kind of industry by industry basis and see where those are ranking. Not talking now about citations entirely, but also about user engagement and user behavior, because we did see people engage fairly deeply with certain kinds of directories, ZocDoc in particular, in the medical vertical.
The flip side of that is it was not at all true in legal. We saw almost no engagement with legal directories, and where we did see engagement, it was largely a pogo click. Oh, this is not something I want to look at.
That's the point right there. Is that you can't either say they matter or they don't matter as a blanket statement. You really have to do it on a kind of industry by industry basis and see for yourself what people are doing.
Yeah,
but we also saw. Go ahead, David. Sorry.
The other comment I would make is that I think that my and I don't know if you were parroting me or whatever, but my thesis that citations are less important is largely applies to these big horizontal sites that are largely in the citation networks of major players. So like yellowpages.com and Superpages and CityGrid and all of those, like those sites don't rank anywhere anymore and users aren't going to engage with them. So the value of a citation on those sites, I would posit, is still extremely low. But the value of a citation on a site that ranks for the queries you want to rank for and users engage with in particular, and medical, is very, very high. And that hasn't really changed over the last 15 years that I've been doing this.
Well, in 2015, I think there, citations were regarded, I think, in the local search ranking factors as the top local factor, one of the top three. And that's obviously changed dramatically. But there's been this shift in the industry to sort of dismissing directory citations almost entirely. This doesn't matter. You don't need to pay attention to it. I think you do need to pay attention where users are engaging with these directories. And, we saw that firsthand in this research. Doesn't matter in certain categories. It'll matter in others.
And I think there may be an offhanded signal of user engagement. On a localized query, if you are seeing more local websites as opposed to directories, it's probably an indicator that the directories have been pogoed a lot. In other words, that Google sees that this engagement drops, that like what we saw in the legal space, whereas in medical, people actually engage. And so if it's a query that generates a lot of directories, it's probably, one, not an area where you're going to be able to compete, and two, it's an area where people are likely engaging with those directories and they become more important. So I think there's a reverse understanding you can take away from the search results that you do.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.